Do you believe a classic Western film nearly killed its own director on the very first day of shooting? Before it became a cinematic legend, this project was a wreck that Universal Studios was desperate to salvage. High Plains Drifter is not merely a revenge Western. It is a blazing nightmare beneath the scorching desert sun, yet it carries the chilling breath of restless souls.
We're talking about hiring a gunfighter.
Behind those haunting frames stood a fully built town raised out of nothing, only to be burned to ashes in a frenzy of real flames. And that's not all. This masterpiece nearly met its end because of lethal lead fumes and treacherous mudflats ready to swallow both man and horse. Its brutality even compelled the icon John Wayne to write a letter condemning it, claiming it smeared the heroic bloodline of America. Below are 20 shocking and disturbing facts about High Plains Drifter's journey back from the brink of death. 20. Clint Eastwood initially didn't want to direct. I often wonder what film history would look like if Clint Eastwood hadn't said yes that day. Picture the 1970s, when Eastwood already stood as a towering icon, a colossal superstar fresh out of the dark shadow of Dirty Harry and the gritty dust of the Dollars trilogy. At first, he had no intention of directing this film. The project, originally titled The Stranger, already had a crew in place, its own director attached, and was simply waiting for the cameras to roll. But exactly 2 weeks before production began, a shock hit. The appointed director suddenly walked away. Universal fell into utter panic. Amid fierce budget disputes and creative deadlock, they turned to their man with no name as a last lifeline. Eastwood agreed, but it was a nod bound by a proud condition. He would have complete creative control. No notes, no interference, no permission to sand down any of its darker edges. Rolling. Everyone knew there was no rolling. Everyone knew there was no turning back for anyone. Largo, a town born from nothing and dying in silence. In the memories of those who worked on the film, the frontier town of Largo was not just a set. It was a living, haunted entity. Eastwood needed a place that looked truly isolated, weathered, and ready to burn. When Hollywood backlots appeared too polished, a mad plan was set in motion. Build an entirely new town from scratch on the desolate shores of Mono Lake. Studio executives reportedly winced as construction crews hauled timber and nails across brutal terrain to reach this remote location. In just over a month, Largo emerged like a mirage in the void, complete with a saloon, hotel, and stable. Yet behind that meticulous detail lay deliberate impermanence. When filming wrapped, most of the town was dismantled, but the main hotel stood alone amid desert winds for years, slowly rotting until it finally collapsed. The ghost town, on screen, truly became a ghost town in real life. A silent testament to Clint Eastwood's absolute creative control. 8. Eastwood nearly died on the first day of shooting. Do you remember the opening scene? When the stranger rides across Mono Lake, a vast, eerie expanse dotted with bizarre tufa formations rising like statues from another planet? It is a perfect shot, but it nearly became the grave of a legendary director. On the very first take, the ground beneath the horse suddenly gave way due to unstable mud. In an instant, Eastwood, wearing heavy costume layers and waterlogged boots, was dragged into the lake. The crew onshore panicked as they watched him vanish beneath the cold, alkaline water. A few seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity before the safety team managed to pull him out. What impressed everyone most was Eastwood's expression. Trembling from swallowing water, yet his eyes burned with determination. Just 20 minutes later, soaked and furious, he mounted the horse again to finish the scene. The spirit rising from the water moment we see on screen is, in truth, a rare brush with death, where the line between art and mortality was separated by mere inches. Seventon, the main character, once had a name. Eastwood crossed it out. Have you ever noticed that the greatest figures in cinematic memory are often the ones whose identities remain unknown? In the earliest drafts lying on Eastwood's desk, the protagonist was not nearly as radically mysterious. He had a very ordinary name, Samuel. He had a past, a biography, and clearly explained motives for revenge. But the moment Eastwood finished reading, he took a pen and struck the name out. The studio reacted fiercely, fearing disaster. How do you sell tickets when the hero has no name? What will the other characters call him? But for Eastwood, ambiguity was the very core. Was he a ghost, a demon, or the embodiment of guilt? Giving him a name would have boxed him in and destroyed the enigma shrouding Largo. That decision transformed what might have been an ordinary revenge western into something legendary and deeply unsettling. And when the final frames faded, audiences left theatres locked in endless debates about who he truly was. Sixten, the brutal whipping flashback that forced SAG to step in. I believe anyone who has ever watched High Plains Drifter can never forget its most brutal sequence. Sheriff Jim Duncan, tied up and whipped to death in the middle of the street. What outrages us is not just the merciless lashes, but the eyes of the townspeople. They stand there, watching it all, doing nothing. Eastwood wanted us, the audience, to feel like accomplices, so that we would understand why the stranger later shows no mercy in delivering his punishment. But behind the camera, the brutality felt terrifyingly real. Rumours spread that real whips were being used and that the blows were genuine, reaching the Screen Actors Guild, SAG. Representatives were sent to supervise and question the stunt coordinators. Technically, the production skirted the rules with padded armour hidden beneath costumes, yet the actor playing Duncan still carried bruises for weeks. When confronted, Eastwood did not apologise. He coldly replied, "If it doesn't hurt to watch, then the scene doesn't work." Fiften, the blood-red inferno and the breath of death. There is an image that has become iconic. The entire town of Largo ordered to be painted a blazing blood red. Eastwood wanted to create a literal hell on earth. But to achieve it quickly on a tight budget, the art department made a deadly mistake. They used surplus industrial paint with extremely high lead content to coat every building. Under the harsh, high desert sun, toxic fumes began to rise. Within hours, the crew suffered headaches, nausea, and rashes. Safety inspectors stepped in and nearly shut down the entire production. Yet once again, Eastwood's resolve prevailed. He forced the crew to continue filming under strict conditions, full protective gear, and shortened shifts. The blood-red town you see on screen, hauntingly beautiful, nearly poisoned the entire film crew during its creation. 14, the cold-blooded gunshot that shattered Western ritual. In the world of classic Westerns, the final shootout is a sacred ritual. Tension builds, honor hangs in the air, and silence allows the hero to display his composure. But Eastwood despised that theatricality. When the stranger confronts the three outlaws, there is no triumphant score, no slow motion, and absolutely no sense of honor. He draws and executes them with ruthless speed, everything over in less than 10 seconds. The stunt coordinators and Universal executives were furious. They feared audiences would feel cheated without the usual emotional crescendo. But Eastwood stood firm. The stranger is not a hero, he is death. And death does not perform. It arrives to erase guilt without emotion. That absence of ritual created a chilling inhumanity, forcing us to realise that in Largo, there is no fairness, only the darkest form of judgment. 13. Two generations and a letter without an ending. I often think of cinema as a current of generational handovers. In 1973, a new chapter opened, but it also slammed shut an old door. After the film's release, Out of admiration for a predecessor, Clint Eastwood wrote to the king of the Western, John Wayne, proposing what could have been a dream collaboration between two eras. The response he received was not a handshake, but an angry rejection. John Wayne, who embodied the righteousness, morality, and heroism of the Old West, condemned Eastwood's film as an insult to the legacy he had spent a lifetime building. Wayne despised what he saw as meaningless violence and the portrayal of a West filled with cowardice and sinners beyond redemption. In the face of that harsh criticism, Eastwood remained silent. That silence was the sharpest reply of all. The era of spotless heroes had ended, making way for strangers emerging from the shadows. 12. When silence speaks, the ending of a harbinger of death, gave the stranger a final monologue. Explaining who he was and why he had come. But Eastwood despised that clarity. He argued fiercely with the studio for days to defend a single idea. The film's power lay in what remained unspoken. Instead of a speech, we are left with a quiet frame. The stranger riding out of town as Mordecai carves letters onto an unmarked grave. No explanation, no unnecessary dialogue. Only grey smoke and an eerie stillness. Studio executives nearly lost their minds when they saw the final cut. But time and box office returns proved Eastwood right. Sometimes the most powerful answer is the one that leaves a void for the audience to fill with their own unease. 11. Verna Bloom and a Kiss. Tainted by the bitterness of guilt. When I look back at Verna Bloom's portrayal of Sarah Belding, I always feel a mixture of sympathy and admiration. She arrived on set expecting a traditional Western, one in which she would stand as the moral anchor, a strong and dignified presence. Instead, reality struck hard. One of the most difficult moments for Bloom was the barn scene, where Sarah is assaulted by the stranger. The sequence sits uncomfortably on the line between violence and coercion, leaving her deeply unsettled. Bloom questioned Eastwood and pleaded with him to soften the scene, to make it less disturbing. But Eastwood refused. He explained that it was not meant to be romantic. It was an exposure of power and the town's collective guilt returning to haunt them. Bloom ultimately agreed, but insisted on shooting it in as few takes as possible. After only 2, the scene was done. Yet it left a lasting scar on her, and perhaps it is precisely because she did not shy away because of that raw, unapologetic honesty that whenever the film's score plays, Sarah Belding lingers in our minds as a reminder of humanity's darkest corners. And Mordecai, a lost soul who found his voice. Some characters are written merely as background, yet somehow become the soul of the entire story. In the earliest drafts, the character of Mordecai, a little person, was conceived as cheap comic relief to lighten the film's dark tone. But veteran actor Billy Curtis saw something deeper. He approached Eastwood and proposed playing Mordecai with quiet dignity, the only person who truly sees what the stranger is. Eastwood was completely persuaded. He revised the script on the spot, giving Mordecai more weight and presence. The result is the Mordecai we remember, the only moral compass in Largo, the only one who offers the stranger respect and receives it in return. In the final moment when Mordecai says, "I never did know your name," and the stranger replies, "Yes, you do," what could have been a minor role becomes one of the most haunting exchanges in the film. 9. Mono Lake, a harsh love song in the heart of the desert. Some landscapes feel as though they do not belong to this world. Mono Lake, sitting over 6,000 feet above sea level, is one of them. An almost alien terrain where tufa towers rise from the water like the fingers of demons. Yet behind its eerie beauty lay a brutal reality that nearly broke the production. The crew lived like exiles, hauling generators, thousands of gallons of water, and every essential supply into the middle of nowhere. Scorching heat by day, bone-chilling cold at night, and sudden winds that toppled equipment pushed human endurance to its limits. At one point, union representatives arrived with the intention of shutting down the set due to complaints about the extreme working conditions. The film survived against the odds, carrying with it a hostility and isolation that no modern soundstage could ever replicate. 8. The Ghost in Room 0. Have you ever wondered whether the unease on screen sometimes seeps in from real life? During filming at the Largo hotel set, there was one place no one wanted to enter alone: the stranger's bedroom. Built meticulously for the camera, it seemed perfect. Yet from the very first day, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered despite a flawless electrical system. Doors creaked open during breaks. A sudden chill would sweep through the room even under a blazing sun. Whispers of a haunting spread across the crew. A veteran cameraman swore he saw a shadow glide along the wall when the room was empty. Others claimed to hear faint murmurs in the middle of the night. Even Clint Eastwood, hardly a man given to superstition, admitted, "There's something not quite right about that room." Whether imagined or not, that genuine unease seeped into the film, giving the hotel scenes an unnatural emptiness, isolation, and coldness that still lingers today. 7. Redemption Denied. The Death of a Love Story. Into the memory of Hollywood filmmakers at the time, a Western always needed a woman to warm the soul of its leading man. Universal's first draft followed that formula. They wrote a kind, educated young schoolteacher who would glimpse the remaining humanity inside the stranger and attempt to redeem him through compassion. The role had even been cast, and the actress was ready to step in front of the camera. Then Eastwood made a ruthless decision. He cut the character entirely. To him, the stranger was not a hero in need of love. He was judgment itself, a merciless force of nature cutting through the town's guilt. Removing the love story meant removing the audience's only emotional escape hatch, leaving nothing but pure, cold revenge. That choice transformed the film into a journey without a safety net, where darkness engulfs everything and no ray of light is allowed through. 6. The Fire That Consumed a Dream and the Naked Truth. I still feel a chill whenever I watch the film's climax. The stranger standing as the town of Largo sinks into an ocean of flames. In today's era of CGI, thousands of digital fires could be conjured with a few clicks. But in 1973, Eastwood chose a harsher path. He wanted to burn it all. Real buildings, real wood. A month's worth of labour, reduced to ashes before the camera. Fire marshals and safety experts were horrified by the plan, listing countless risks beyond control. Yet Eastwood refused to back down. On that fateful day, as flames leapt from one building to the next, the heat rose so intensely that cameras had to be repositioned farther away to avoid damage. Eastwood stood there in silence, amid furnace-like heat, watching the town he had painstakingly built turn to dust in a single take. What you see on screen is not special effects. It is a real apocalypse, an ultimate sacrifice for a violently beautiful vision. 5. Dee Barton and Notes Echoing from Hell. If you close your eyes and listen to High Plains Drifter, you will not hear triumphant brass from traditional Western heroes. What you hear instead are Dee Barton's unsettling guitar chords, like echoes from a dark cavern, mingled with the crack of whips and the whispers of desert winds. Eastwood wanted music that disturbed, a score that would burrow into the subconscious and refuse to leave. But the studio hated this off-key tone. They secretly brought in another composer to layer in safer, more traditional Western elements. When Eastwood discovered it, he listened for exactly 30 seconds before walking out without a word. The next day, he delivered a blunt declaration. "If you change even one note of Barton's music, I will remove my name from this film." Universal had no choice but to yield. In the end, that very wrongness became the film's unmistakable signature, a nightmare with a soundtrack that lingers in the memory of nostalgic cinephiles. 4. A betrayal behind his back and the audience's verdict. In the industry's collective memory, the relationship between director and studio is often an uncompromising battle. Terrified of the film's bleak tone, Universal secretly assembled an alternate ending behind Eastwood's back. They inserted scenes suggesting renewal, narration hinting that Largo has learned its lesson and will be better. They wanted a safe exit for audiences. But during a private test screening, something unexpected happened. Viewers rejected it outright. Comment cards bluntly called the ending cowardly. When Eastwood found out, a heated confrontation erupted in the studio office, voices raised and tempers flaring. The alternate cut was buried for good. 3. The silence of the rider and the power of mystery. For 50 years, film lovers have asked one burning question. Who is the stranger, really? A ghost returned from the grave? An avenging angel for Marshall Duncan? Or merely a wandering gunman crossing paths with human sin? Faced with endless theories, Clint Eastwood simply smiled and chose silence. He understood that in art, the moment the creator explains everything is the moment the magic dissolves. That silence once drove studio executives mad. They wanted a clear, marketable answer. But Eastwood was too wise to destroy his child with certainty. The absence of an official explanation turned the film into a living legend. It is debated like theology and dissected in classrooms as a study in symbolism. 2. Carmel mission, the permanent price for 5 seconds on screen. I still remember the image of a small church appearing briefly in an establishing shot. Carmel mission, a sacred site dating back to 1771. The crew captured that dawn shot swiftly, without official permission. When church officials realised their place of worship had appeared in a film steeped in violence and supernatural overtones, a firm decision followed. Clint Eastwood was permanently banned from the church grounds. Eastwood did not protest, apologise, or attempt reconciliation. To him, if that was the price for 5 perfect seconds on screen, it was a price worth paying. 1. From cold-shouldered failure to immortal monument. There is a bitter truth. Upon its release, High Plains Drifter was not greeted with applause. Critics were sharply divided. Many dismissed it as nihilistic, decadent, even a betrayal of the West's moral spirit. Its modest opening box office made Universal consider it a failed experiment best forgotten. But time, the fairest judge, restored its standing. From small art house theatres to university film classes, the film's reputation spread like a quiet flame. It became a cult classic, influencing directors such as Quentin Tarantino and the Coen brothers. More than half a century later, we see clearly, High Plains Drifter is not just a Western. It marks a pivotal evolution in Clint Eastwood's artistry and stands as one of the most significant films of the 1970s. Looking back at High Plains Drifter after more than 50 years, we see not only a dark Western, but the resolve of an artist willing to defy every convention to protect his vision. Was there a moment among these 20 facts that completely changed how you see this film? Or do you know another hidden corner of Clint Eastwood's story that wasn't mentioned here? Feel free to share with our community of film lovers. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next deep dive.